In today's video, we're going to continue on our series covering all 31 NHL teams, doing an in-depth analysis of their complete prospect pool, including all their 2018 NHL Draft selections. Today's team we're covering is the Ottawa Senators, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. Today we're covering the Ottawa Senators prospects and really doing an in-depth analysis here as all their prospects coming up down the pipe here to make the team here in the next couple of years, including the guys they selected here at the 2018 NHL Draft. So we're going to get started here with a couple of guys that I think are almost a certainty to be full-time players here on the Senators roster this coming season. So let's kick things off here by starting to talk about center iceman Colin White. Now, as we know, Colin White was their first-round selection back in 2015. Played a season at Boston College before turning pro. Has had a chance to play a little bit of time in the NHL and a fair bit of time at the American Hockey League level as well. So far in his NHL career, he's got 23 games under his belt and he's only put up 6 points. He's trying to find a consistent role. Obviously with the club, he's kind of bounced around and positioning a lot, kind of filling in due to injuries and whatnot so far. But his time in the American Hockey League, I think, has been reasonably productive. He's had a chance to play a bigger role, play a little bit more in all situations and kind of show what he's capable of here. At the AHL level, he's played in 50 games and put up 30 points. So obviously he's also had a chance to represent his country before playing at the World Junior Championships, playing for Team USA, and had a tremendous World Junior tournament here 2 years back. Was a big star of that tournament, one of the top forwards for sure. So obviously Colin White has a tremendous offensive upside, but he's also a very smart, solid two-way player as well. It's not really clear yet if he's going to be a center at the NHL level. He could turn out to be a winger. There was a point last season when he had a chance to play on the right side of Matt Duchene, and he looked pretty solid in that position. He looked pretty comfortable. So hopefully he'll have a chance to play a little bit more of a bigger role with the Senators this year and have a chance to play with some more offensive players so we can hopefully see that offensive game come to be here at the NHL level. Next up, I want to discuss the Ottawa Senators 2016 first-round selection, taken number 11 overall, and that is center iceman Logan Brown. Now, obviously, Logan Brown here is a huge guy. He's at 6'6", over 218 pounds. He's the son of former NHL defenseman Jeff Brown. You'll notice a trend here with the Ottawa Senators prospects. Lately, they've been really big on American-born players as well as second-generation talent. They have a number of players here that were come through the U.S. National Development Program or born in the U.S., as well as guys who have fathers who are NHL players as well. So it's quite a trend here that seems to be for the Senators prospects. Getting back to Logan Brown here, obviously he's played his junior career in the Ontario Hockey League, put up some pretty decent numbers, also had a chance to play representing the USA at the World Junior Championships as well. The only issue with Brown is the last couple of years I find his development's he's progressed, but at the same time stalled a little bit due to injuries. He's missed a fair bit of time. Technically, he did make the Senators roster at a camp last year, got into a handful of games here before they decided to send him back to junior. But when he was playing with the big club here, he did not look out of place, looked reasonably comfortable as well. So obviously he's a big, strong center iceman. For a big guy, he does get around the ice relatively well as well. So that's obviously a good sign. Sometimes players that large struggle with their skating or their foot speed and mobility and such, but for Brown, he's a pretty athletic guy, so that doesn't seem to be much of an issue for him. Because he is such a big guy as well, he's not afraid to use his size, in the corners and along the boards. He uses his size as well to kind of protect the puck as well. He's got a really good shot and pretty creative offensive player here. So I'm not sure if he'd really project to be a top line center, but I could certainly see him being a pretty solid number 2 center for sure. Obviously, it is possible at some point in time here we might see an All-American line between Logan Brown, Colin White, and newly drafted prospect, which we'll get into momentarily here, Brady Tkachuk. That would actually work out well. It was something that I've seen speculated through online here in social media, and that might actually be a good fit down the road. All three of these American-born players would actually slot nicely with Logan Brown being down the middle, Tkachuk on the left side, and White on the right. So hard to say if we'll see that down the road here in Ottawa, but it's certainly something that's nice to look forward to here, especially with everything going on with the club here this past year. Now, speaking of Brady Tkachuk, we might as well jump into him next. Obviously, he was their 2018 first-round selection, taken number 4 overall out of Boston University. Obviously, as I mentioned, the trend here, he's also a second-generation talent. Father Keith Tkachuk was a longtime great hockey player at the NHL level. His older brother Matthew plays for the Calgary Flames. Brady Tkachuk is a little bit bigger than his brother Matthew, is a little bit more offensive flair. He's a big, strong guy. guy. He can pretty responsible defensively as well. Does all the things well. You know, not afraid to go to the net, use his size. Good in the corners, along the boards as well. Pretty good offensive instincts. So Brady Tkachuk is going to be that gritty type top 6 power forward that they're desperately lacking right now. So it's not clear yet if he's going to join the NHL this season or go back to college for a year, or even possibly play in the Ontario Hockey League. His rights are owned by the London Knights, and it has been rumored and speculated that he may consider playing a season for London and not go back to Boston University. I know when their BU's coach left to become the Rangers head coach, it was reported that Brady Tkachuk was, not real thrilled about maybe going back there since the head coach wasn't going to be there any longer. But we'll see. A lot of that's hearsay because that hasn't come from himself. So we'll see what happens here. But either way, he's certainly a bright forward to look forward to getting into the lineup, whether it be this year or possibly next. Next up, I want to talk about a forward who I've had a chance to see play in person a few times, and he's very impressive. He was a 2017 later round selection, and that's Drake Batherson, playing in the QMJHL, mostly played in Cape Breton for the Screaming Eagles. Obviously, he was born and raised in Nova Scotia as well, so a fellow maritime hockey player, which is great to see another talent coming out of this part of the country have an opportunity to make the NHL here. Part of the way through last season, though, he was traded from Cape Breton as they were not having the best season, so they sent him off to the Blainville-Broysbend Armada with a chance to, where he really had a chance to really take his game to another level and get into the playoffs and do some damage, and he really thrived strongly with that team. He ended up being the QMJHL's leading playoff scorer as they went on quite a run and just came up a little bit short in winning the QMJHL championship. They eventually were beat out by Acadie Bathurst, who went on to win the Memorial Cup here, as we've discussed on this channel many times before. But Drake Batherson's got pretty good size, excellent shot, very creative offensive player. He's a little bit of a late bloomer considering his age right now. He actually was drafted at a little bit of a later age. The Senators found in the later rounds, and that they're absolutely thrilled about. He also had a chance to play last year for Team Canada at the World Juniors and had a tremendous showing, scored lots of goals, and he was arguably their top forward, at least a top goal scorer for sure. So Batherson's really emerged here in the past year or two. I know he had a pretty good showing at development camp last year in Ottawa, and they're quite excited for this player. So he's, like I said, he's a player I've had a chance to see before. He's very exciting, and be quite interested to see if he cracks the roster and gets a chance to play some games in Ottawa this year. If not, he'll certainly have a chance to develop a bit in Belleville first. They have lots of prospects here to try to squeeze into their lineup. But with everything going on with the club, and obviously after last year not being very good, I'm sure they'd like to get as much youth into their lineup here as possible this coming season. Next up, I want to discuss another 2017 first-round selection, and that's Alex Formenton. Now, he's another guy like Logan Brown who actually made the club out of camp last season, got into one game, hung around with the club for a while, but eventually was sent back to junior. Obviously, he plays with the London Knights, so obviously that's a great program in London, putting out a lot of great hockey players. Formenton's mainly known for his tremendous speed. The kid can absolutely fly up and down the ice, and he's actually a pretty good stick handler as well. Sometimes you see some players are so fast that they have a hard time with everything else kind of keeping up with their legs, but he's a smart enough hockey player and good stick handler. He can not having any trouble with that at all. To see him take a pass off the rush and kind of cut in towards the net is something he does very well. Not afraid to kind of go down and drive towards the net and try to score some nice goals. So Formenton is certainly a speedster. I could certainly see him progressing to be a second to third line winger for sure at the NHL level. So we'll see last year where he did get a small sample of time at the NHL level. I would fully suspect that his odds of making the team this year have really gone up that much more again after having another solid year in junior once he went back to London. So we'll see, but Alex Formenton is certainly the speedster of this group, and look forward to adding him at the lineup here in Ottawa. So one more forward to discuss here before we jump over and take a look at some defensemen and goaltenders. Lastly here, I want to talk about Filip Chlapik, who was a 2015 selection by the Ottawa Senators at the 15 draft. Played his junior hockey in Charlottetown in the QMJHL, the Charlottetown Islanders. Originally from the Czech Republic, he's a pretty solid two-way center. Pretty good offensive upside. Has had great success. Last year was his first full pro year, and he did get some time at the NHL level, but did a lot of time at the American Hockey League level and led that team in scoring. Pretty responsible, really. At that level, at least, he's pretty good on faceoffs. He could be used in all situations. I would think with Chlapik, if he kind of projects to me to be more of a bottom six type center, probably like third line, maybe fourth, but I can certainly see him being an NHL player. He does have a lot of talent, but I don't think he has quite the higher end upside of some of the other players we've talked about. I think guys like White and Brown, Tkachuk, Batherson, Formenton, all these guys I think have more offensive potential than Chlapik does, but I think he could be a very responsible piece in the bottom half of the lineup here. They kind of fill things out nicely. I want to talk about a potential goaltender of the future here, and that's Filip Chlapik, who they obtained in the trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins when they traded Drake Batherson at the trade deadline last season. Now, obviously, Gustafsson is from Sweden. He's still quite young. Came over to North America towards the end of last season, had a chance to play a little bit in Belleville here before the season came to an end. He's represented Sweden before at the World Junior Championships, was my main exposure to watching him play, and he certainly was incredibly impressive there. So he's still quite young. It's nice to see a nice goalie prospect in the system look this good. Gustafsson not only impressed at the World Junior Championships, but in his other games that he's played back in Sweden, you could tell he has very good lateral movement. He's got good rebound control. He's a pretty athletic goaltender. So hopefully Filip Chlapik can really have a solid year playing in the AHL this season and hopefully become that goaltender that the Ottawa Senators desperately need moving forward. Now, the last player I want to talk about here today is defenseman Christian Wolanin. Now, Wolanin was a signing that came late last season once his college career came to an end after playing for the University of North Dakota for a few years. Wolanin is another American-born player of a second-generation NHL talent. His father, Craig Wolanin, was an NHL defenseman for many years as well. So the trend continues here with that type of player for the Ottawa Senators. But after signing his pro contract and getting into, I believe it was 10 games with Ottawa last season, he did not look out of place at all. He looked incredibly comfortable. Offensively, he's a very offensively gifted guy, and he looked like he was very comfortable with that as well. Like most young defensemen getting into the NHL, his defensive game is going to need some work. He has the potential to be a power play quarterback. So that's always good. You want to have as many guys like that as you can. Obviously, good at rushing the puck, that good first pass out of the zone. So obviously, like, I was pretty impressed with Wolanin. I fully suspect he'll make the team at a training camp this year, be my guess. I think he deserves a spot myself. May not necessarily play every game, but I can see him hanging around with the big club and at least being at the very least a number 7 defenseman. So I fully suspect Christian Wolanin to make the roster at a training camp and start to have an impact on this club as soon as this fall. Now, next up, I just want to do a quick summary here of the 2018 NHL Draft selections for the Ottawa Senators. So I'm going to put a graphic here on the full screen here so to kind of show you a summary of all their selections, and let's go through them. So obviously, we already talked about Brady Tkachuk taking number 4 overall. Later in the first round, at number 26 overall, they took a defenseman out of the Alberta Junior Hockey League, Jacob Bernard Docker. Obviously, he's expected to go be playing college hockey this fall, and he is expected to be a pretty decent defenseman. In the second round, number 48 overall, they took another defenseman out of the BCHL, Johnny Tykonik. So obviously that's another defenseman. In the fourth round, because they didn't have a third round pick, in the fourth round, at number 95 overall, they selected a center out of the U.S. National Development Program. Obviously, they've been taking a lot of players from this program in recent years, and that's Jonathan Gruden. In the fifth round, they took number 126 overall. They selected a left winger out of the BC Hockey League, and that's Angus Crookshank. I mean, if nothing else, you got to love that name. Angus Crookshank's quite the name. With their sixth round selection, number 157 overall, they selected the goaltender from the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles, and that's Kevin Mandolese. He's certainly one of the better goaltenders available in this draft. In my opinion, the 2018 NHL Draft was a little bit weak on goaltenders. There's probably about 5 or 6 that I could see maybe being NHL goalies, and he was certainly one of them. So that's good news. Besides the other prospect we talked about with Gustafsson, and they also have Hogberg as well. So between Gustafsson, Hogberg, and now Mandolese into the mix here, that hopefully will create a little bit more depth at the prospect position here, prospect goalies for the Ottawa Senators. The Senators had 2 selections in the 7th round. The first one, number 188 overall, they took a forward from the Janesville Jets, which is Jakub Novak. Their second 7th round selection was a right winger out of Minnetonka, which is a Minnesota high school league, Luke Loheat, number 194. So obviously they added a couple of extra forwards here to their prospect pool. So overall, they have a lot of very interesting prospects. Not all of them are higher end, but they have a good mix between some high-end prospects and some kind of mid-level prospects. So I must say, I think they do have one of the better prospect pools across the NHL. I wouldn't say it's the absolute best in the league, but I'd certainly say it's in the top tier for sure. They have a lot of guys that are very interesting here, drafted in the past 2 to 3 years that do project to be pretty decent NHL players. So time will tell, but I think there's reason for optimism in Ottawa here moving forward with all these guys coming up the ranks. Now, if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.